This channel, like so many other horror narration channels, has been demonetized by YouTube. If you like what you hear and would like to support creepy ghost stories, then please consider joining my Patreon. The link is in the description below. I always hated camping, and I was simply never good at outdoor activities. Everything that involved not sleeping on the comfort of your own bed, being without air conditioning or heater, was a no-go for me. And despite my hate towards outdoor activities and sports, my parents were obsessed with taking me and my little brother, Lenny, camping. They always took us at least once a year, normally during the summer holidays. My parents were both science professors at a prestigious university and constantly looked for a new place to camp. One summer, they decided to take us to a new destination that they were studying. It was a forest in the south of our country. My brother was 3 and I was 8 years old, and I was certainly not looking forward to it. The trip was quite long, but it was beautiful. You could see thousands of trees from every side you look, and eventually, when we got off the main road, we were surrounded by trees everywhere. At first, I was too busy playing with my Tamagotchi, but eventually, after it died, I had no option but to appreciate the view. Surprisingly, it took my parents ages to find the exact place where we were going to stay. My brother and I started to get frustrated, and Mom had to tell us off more than once, and Dad kept looking at a map that wasn't in our language. It even looked like a different alphabet, come to think of it. But my parents were really odd, strange, bizarre, all adjectives combined. They were so caught up in their own world they didn't care about our well-being. All they cared about was their studies and work. My parents' biggest dream was to win the Nobel Prize and having major discoveries. They worked day and night and always came out with the most random ideas. We had no other family since my mom was a complicated person, and she didn't speak to our grandparents, and my dad had no family, therefore it was only my parents, Lenny and I. Eventually, after many hours of driving, we got to our destination. To my surprise, the place where my parents decided to camp wasn't the best spot. It was full of trees and branches. It barely had sunshine due to the leaves blocking the sun. My description is not even an exaggeration. We did not have anywhere to put up our tent. And since we arrived to the place, my parents were only focused in looking at the surroundings. Lenny and I were extremely hungry and asked our parents if there was something to eat, and they had brought some sandwiches, but our drinks were almost empty. We ate the sandwiches, but were so thirsty, we kept telling them how thirsty we were, but they were too busy. And Mom told us to go get our own drinks from a river nearby. She showed us the way, and once the river was visible, she told us to go fill some bottles and come back the same way. Lenny stayed close to me, but I was the one that leaned down and filled the bottles. As I was doing so, Lenny started to say hi to somebody. Now, I didn't pay attention at first, but after a minute, he kept going louder and louder. And I turned to take a better look, but I didn't see anything. And I asked Lenny, who was he talking to? And he answered me he was saying hi to the boy. And I figured out there must be some other family camping around the area. We came back to where the car was located and noticed our parents were not around. They were probably doing their research or whatever. We got in the car by ourselves for a little bit until it began to rain, and my parents were forced to come back. During our first night, we slept in the car. It was very uncomfortable, but as I previously said, there was nowhere we could put a tent. The floor conditions weren't the best. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't a camping area and my parents knew about it, but they didn't care because they had other motives to be there. And I heard my parents saying that they were studying the area and those sort of things. And I did not tell my parents what had happened earlier when we were at the river. And to be honest, since I didn't even see anyone, I kind of forgot about it. But now, I wish I had done so. Uncomfortable and all, we managed to fall asleep. The next day, as soon as we woke up, our parents told us that we could go and try some fishing in the lake. And I was rather a fishing expert. Lenny, of course, was young and had no clue about fishing, but as long as we stick together, everything was going to be fine. As I was fishing, Lenny started to say hi to somebody once again. Excited, thinking it was a kid to play with as the one we saw yesterday, I turned around, but once I turned, I not only saw a kid, but also an adult. Lenny, being a little joyful kid and not caring about physical appearances, smiled at them. But I was more than terrified once I caught a good look at them. There were two people looking at us. A young kid. He looked just a little bit older than Lenny, and I could notice his age because of his height. And he was with a woman. However, they didn't look like your average people. Even though their body type was human, their faces looked as if they had been melted. Eyes, mouth, they still had those, but their nose was barely there. You could just see two little holes, but not the actual shape of a nose. Their yellowish teeth were huge and showed a lot. They were wearing clothes, but they were ripped and dirty, and they looked rather old. I was completely astonished, staring at their appearance, when suddenly they walked in our direction. My first instinct was to grab my little brother and try to get away from those creatures, but that just led them to walk faster. It was obvious they were going to come for us. Being nervous, I started to get away backwards without realizing the lake was there. Lenny and I ended up falling in the lake. I grabbed him hard and we swam to the surface. Once we sticked our heads out of the water, we realized there was nobody around anymore. It was just the two of us. I quickly got us out of the water and ran to where our car was. Luckily, my parents were there. Lenny was crying. I looked very agitated, and of course, we were soaking wet. My parents asked me what had happened to us, and I quickly replied by telling what we have experienced. But as I was talking, they looked rather skeptical. At first, they said it was impossible for other people to be around here because it was very far away from the camping area. But after a while, they did consider the possibility of another family camping around here. Though, they did not believe us about these monster-like creatures. Our last night of camping had come. Just like the day before, we were sleeping in our car. My parents were speaking about plants, trees, and those sort of things. They were acting as if nothing had happened earlier. But Lenny and I knew it all. We couldn't stop looking out of our windows. I was so disturbed, I didn't even want to read books or speak. As I looked through the windows, in the dark of the night, I saw something moving around some trees. It was something big. And I immediately told my parents, but they ignored me and said I was making things up. But it wasn't like that. I knew we were not alone. I knew whatever was chasing us was not just humans. And I knew they were coming for us, and that the next time we saw them, it would be the final encounter. After about 30 minutes of me seeing something, my parents decided to turn off our lanterns and decided it'd be better if we all went to sleep. And it didn't take them long to fall asleep, and my brother had already fallen asleep as well. And I was the only one who was still wide awake when I heard a noise outside the car. It sounded as if somebody had stepped on a branch. I decided to look and saw a creature similar to the ones we previously saw in the lake. I immediately screamed, waking my parents up, and immediately told them what I've seen. Dad grabbed the lanterns and went to see outside as Mom, Lenny, and I waited in the car. But the moment he stepped outside was the moment something crashed down on him. It all happened extremely fast. Mom and I watched from the car. The creature had bitten my dad's neck, and my dad was bleeding all over. My mom immediately locked the car and tried to start it, but it wasn't working. And the creature walked to the car and started hitting the windows. And taking a better look at it, I realized it was a man. Same thing as the creatures before. It had a human form, but its face was also deformed, almost melted. I really just don't know how to describe it. This guy's face was falling off. But this guy, well, this one looked more violent than the rest from the other day. It was frantic, and I knew we were going to end up like my dad. As the creature pushed and pushed in his attempt to break the glass, Mom quickly grabbed something from the glove compartment and pointed it at the creature, and I realized it was a gun. When the creature finally broke through the window, Mom shot him 3 times, 2 in the head and 1 somewhere else. Blood splattered everywhere. My mom was covered in blood, and Lenny and I not so much, but we still had some on her clothes. The creature looked dead, just slumped over. Lenny and I cried and screamed until Mom finally reacted. She grabbed me by the hand, carried Lenny, and we both ran away from the car. We must have ran for 40 minutes until we actually found a small cave. And in the cave, Mom told us to be quiet. We asked her what those creatures were, but she had no idea. She looked as afraid as my brother and I were. She started to ask us questions about the creatures we had seen earlier, but we told her they were not the ones that tried to attack us. We told Mom every detail, but she still couldn't understand what was going on. And according to her knowledge of the area, this place was empty, and not many people came around. We were at least 14 miles away from any camping areas, but my mom knew we had to go there if we wanted to survive. It was our only chance. Mom came to the conclusion it wasn't wise to stay in the cave during the night, but we'd be easy prey if we didn't. So even if tired, we decided the best thing was to try and sleep for the night and wake up early, around 5 in the morning, and then go out and try to look for help. Lenny fell asleep, then me, and apparently my mom stayed awake looking after us. We woke up at the time that we had planned, exactly at 5 in the morning. Mom said we had to go back to the car for some maps, water, and other supplies. And mind you, this all happened in the 90s when not everybody had cell phones, so there was no way we could have contacted others unless we walked to the camping area. When we finally got there, Mom told us not to look. She didn't want us to see our dead father. I heard her sob, but Lenny and I kept our eyes away from it. And after a couple of minutes, Mom gasped and screamed, and that's when we finally looked at her. She said We had to grab the things quickly and get away from there. We grabbed what we needed and ran. My mom held my brother because he was still so young he couldn't run fast, and I ran next to Mom holding her hand and looking everywhere hoping those awful monsters wouldn't get us. And after about 40 minutes of running, according to my mom's chronometer, we stopped somewhere. We drank some water and ate a quick snack while Mom looked at the map for better directions. And I asked her, why did we have to run instead of just walking fast until there? And she said it's because the corpse of the male creature who attacked us was no longer there. And neither was the gun. Therefore, if something came after us, we were screwed and unable to defend ourselves. Our rest only lasted about 15 minutes, and then we had to keep walking. We walked fast, but not so fast as to get tired. And all the way, I felt the sensation as if we were being followed and seen or watched. And after an hour, I started to see things moving around the trees, and I told Mom, who looked back at where I pointed and confirmed it as well. We were being followed at a distance by the little boy and the female-looking creatures. We got scared and tried to run, when suddenly, something huge tackled us. I stood up and grabbed Lenny as my mom tried to battle it. It was one of them, a male-looking one as the one yesterday. He was extremely creepy, and Mom yelled at us, telling us to run away. I shook my head, refusing to do it at first, but when I saw this thing biting off my mom's face without thinking it, I lifted up Lenny and decided to run with him. Unfortunately, as we turned around, another one of those creatures was there. It was another creepy male one. He was huge, and his face looked completely messed up. He gave us a smile, and his teeth were huge, separated and brown. As he made a move to attack me and my brother, there was a shot. This big, awful thing had been shot by somebody. He collapsed and fell to the ground, and that's when I saw who saved us. It was the female and the boy. They actually had taken my mom's gun. She quickly came and shot the creature who was attacking my mom. And along with her child, they tried to help Mom, but there was nothing left to do. Mom was already dead. Lenny and I had nobody else in the world. The creature and her child gave us something to eat and something to drink, and told us to walk in a certain direction. I had no idea where they were taking me or what was going to happen, but there was nothing else we could do. Eventually, I could finally see where we were heading. We were not very far from the camping area. I smiled and tried to run with my brother where people like us were, but the creature held my brother tight and shook her head as like saying no. It was hard for me to understand, but after reading their expressions, I understood that they wanted my brother to stay. Well, I refused at first, but after looking at my brother holding the boy's hand tighter than mine and smiling at each other, I understood he would be better here with his new family, even if it was not a conventional one. I kissed my brother and asked him if he wanted to stay. His little laugh and his nod said it all, and I gave him a big hug, and then I left. Some campers eventually found me and took me to the city where I told the authorities of what happened. However, I only mentioned the creatures that tried to attack us, not the ones that helped us. They didn't even believe the creatures existed, but they did investigate, and they did go into the woods. They never found anything, including my parents' corpses or the car. I know we had been deep in the woods, so there might not have been a way that they even got there. I was adopted by a lovely Asian couple and went to therapy for many years. Many people tried to convince me that what I had gone through wasn't as I thought, but I knew it was and never forgot about it. 20 years later, being a married adult, I was watching TV when they interrupted our program to show this news about a group of creatures that looked like people who were found in the forest. And as they showed the pictures, I realized they were the same creatures I encountered many years ago. Apparently, some campers were attacked by something, but were saved by an old female creature and 2 male ones. The survivors claimed that the female and one of the males were mutant-looking, but the other one looked just like a human. They managed to take a picture of the 3 of them. It was the woman and the child that one day saved us. The 3rd one in the picture, well, he was my brother. I started crying, but, well, I wasn't sad. I was happy. Lenny and his family were in fact some of the good ones. In the forest, I lost absolutely everything I ever had, but my brother seemed to have gained a decent life.